Okay, thank you. Still have a minute, I believe. I feel like I'm in the public's COVID line right now, staring at the minutes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Village of Tequesta and to a Village Council workshop. It is Monday, February 1st, 2021, and it is 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Brennan.
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone.
And here through Zoom.
Councilmember Brandon.
Here.
Councilmember DeAmbra.
Here.
Councilmember Prince.
Here.
Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Moving on, we're going to take the first agenda item, which is amending the sign code for temporary signage. And Mr. Allen, I believe you are going to present that.
Mayor, members of council, two previous occasions we've workshopped some temporary signage or some of the sign code. The last workshop, council asked staff to specifically focus on the sandwich board signs. So in your packet, you have the proposed language for that code. It's worth noting that there are many municipalities that expressly prohibit these types of signs. Just to name a few: Jupiter, North Palm Beach, Lake Worth Beach, Juneau Beach, just a few in our area. Although there are some general consensus that prohibit them, there are some municipalities that do allow them, and so I've kind of poached some of that code. So the attached you have is kind of a proactive approach based on some of the conversation we had about trying to listen and assist our local businesses. Just a couple of the highlights of this proposed language. It'd be permitted through the building department on a yearly basis, can be revoked at any point if the rules aren't followed. They're allowed one sandwich board. Currently, we allow a sandwich board now, but it's got to be within 5 feet of a building. This would change in that they would be able to move that sandwich board anywhere in front of their storefront all the way up into the sidewalk. So it needs, the sign would have to be between the sidewalk and their storefront. It should not be up against the road or in the right of way. Anywhere from it should be 24 inches by 36 inches up to that size. It should be removed on a daily basis, and or if there's significant weather notice for the Village of Tequesta. Be constructed of a rigid frame, durable materials, no electrical components or flashing lights or twirling of any kind. Must be maintained in a good condition. And then each board will have a sign owner identification placed on it, so it makes it easy for code compliance. If they see something out of compliance, they can easily just go up to the board, figure out whose sign it is, and call that number. So it'll have a name, number, and address that they can easily call. So those are a couple of the highlights. Open to suggestions or feedback from the council, and I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Who would like to begin? Councilmember?
Yeah, just a couple of things, Jeremy. When we say removed at the close of business, I'm assuming that's defined by the operating hours of that particular business. We don't. So if somebody closes at 6, they remove it at 6. If somebody's open till 9, they remove it at 9.
That's right.
Okay. You just mentioned, you said in front of the business. I'm not sure I quite caught this. A lot of the businesses, the sidewalks go right up to the front of, they're literally up to the building. So obviously they're placing it in the sidewalk close to their business, front. That's permitted, right?
Yeah, I'm referring to, there's
Other
sometimes.
situations where there's spacing and,
Well, sometimes there's like two sidewalks. There's a
Yes.
sidewalk right in front. I'm actually proposing, we're talking about the sidewalk that's out by the right-of-way. So not on the street side, but in front of the business side. So from the sidewalk to the business, they can actually move that.
Okay.
That A-frame sign out. It just can't be in the right-of-way. So it needs to be before the sidewalk.
okay. So if there are, you're right, there's a few locations that have that kind of flexibility, and we're just allowing them to utilize that.
That's right.
Okay, those are the only two items I had.
All right, thank you. Councilmember
I'm pretty
Prince?
clear on it, and I don't have any questions.
All right,
Just
Councilman.
for the record, it can't be handmade. It has to be designed aesthetically and approved.
Yeah, I think that number, let me find the
And
number.
handmade, I mean by taking a piece of plywood or a piece of cardboard and just writing it out with a marker, et cetera.
Yeah, so this proposed language says the sandwich board signs be constructed with a rigid frame made of durable materials and constructed in such a manner to be able to withstand environmental conditions. Signs constructed with cardboard, paper, and other similar non-durable materials are prohibited.
Perfect.
So I think it allows for, the idea is when they go to the building department, they should tell us where they're gonna put their sign, so that way we can make sure that it's approved in the right spot, not gonna block traffic, safety, anything like that. And then hopefully they'll have a picture or some kind of idea of what that sign will look like, so that way the building department can make sure it's of good nature.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
So I'm glad we're doing this. I do have a couple concerns, even though I think the gist of it is good. You mentioned that you can have this sign in front of the storefront. What if the storefront is kind of back in a corner like Vintage Wine? Would that allow them to put it all the way up there on that Tequesta Drive?
It's a good question. I think we would probably allow some flexibility there because their building or their storefront is facing that direction. So I think we would, I think use common sense in that situation. We can maybe put some, we maybe look at the language a little bit just to allow a little more flexibility for something like that. So we're not picking and choosing, but maybe so we can, Keith and I'll maybe brainstorm that one just to put some different language in there.
And just to be clear, if we move forward with this, in that particular location, there's roughly called 10 businesses. Would we allow 10 sandwich boards there in the grass before the sidewalk?
Yeah, in this scenario, which is, one of the, I guess, concerns that had come up even at previous workshops. When you allow them, you could have 5, 10 of them out there, depending on how many businesses you have. And that's the concern of allowing signage out there. And so yes, you could, it's possible.
Yeah, that'd be my only concern, is that we create an environment of, which I know it's hard to put things in words on writing and paper and for every situation.
Just to follow up on that, though, we're saying it has to be, and I understand the situation with Vintage Wines, and we could probably put some language in there to allow some flexibility, but otherwise, we're saying it's got to be in front of the business. So I guess if we're talking about like Gallery North, you just can put a bunch of sandwich boards out on the grass in front of the shopping center, because it's not in front of the business, right? We're saying it's got to be in front of the business itself.
Right.
Okay.
But what I guess Kyle's reference, if you have you have a strip mall there with 7 business, you could have 7 A-frame signs sitting out.
Right. Well, I heard it mention signs in the grass, so that's why I wanted to make sure that we're talking about, again, the location is, generally speaking, unless there's an unusual set of circumstances, it's going to be in front of that business location.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it's in front of the business, but between the secondary sidewalk and the right of way.
Right.
If there is a secondary sidewalk, that's what we were talking about earlier.
Right. And Gary North has that sidewalk.
I couldn't think of any commercial districts that, in my mind, that I couldn't think of any that didn't have a sidewalk in front of them. I mean, maybe there is, but I think most of them have that secondary sidewalk out by the road. So they wouldn't be able to put it past that. They had to put it on this side. I mean, there may be a commercial business that there isn't a sidewalk, but I couldn't think of one off the top of my head when I was writing this.
Bruce, are there, Cypress Drive, does it
Well,
have?
that's what I was just saying, like
No.
Cypress might have
Cypress,
some
yeah.
out there on it, Jeremy. That'd be the only place that I could think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I would like to chime in on this, because I have just envision, if you can, you're on US 1, and there are a bunch of sandwich boards, which are sandwich boards. They're not signs, they're not a marquee, just one after another, and they're not going to look the same. And is this something we really want to bring to this village? Now, I am all for helping the businesses, because we went to this business forum that Jeremy arranged with Palm Beach North Chamber, and we talked about the big things that could be done, things that would make sense. You know, maybe they're talking maybe branding, they're talking about different things that could make sense. I just feel awful if I'm going to drive down US 1 and see that right up against. Sandwich boards belong up by the business. That's what they're sandwich boards. They're going to lean, they're going to not, you say the weather, but look at the wind out there today. They're going to remember to go out and get it. They're little, they're tiny. And I'm just concerned about it. I'm truly concerned. I don't think that this is the way the people in the village live in the village, because of who we are, our charm, our appeal. And I would hate for us to I just don't know how many people going 45 miles an hour down US 1, I'm using that first, all right, are really going to see that sandwich board and make a decision. I'm going to go in there now because I saw a sandwich board and I'm doing 55 miles or 45 miles an hour if we're lucky. I just don't think this is the way. I think, yes, let's have them in front of the businesses, maybe 5 feet, maybe whatever it is, but I absolutely do not feel comfortable putting these up by the street. I think it'll look unkempt. I just don't believe it's DeQuesta. It's just going to be difficult.
I do agree with you on that, on the main roads way out. I do agree that it needs to be near the business so that it matches and you can figure out which sign goes to which.
Right.
To me, that makes sense.
They belong near their businesses.
Well, that-
They have marquees.
That was the purpose of my first question, because, and again, that's where I was looking for clarity, is that if you're in Gallery North, there's a sidewalk in front of your business, that's where your sign should go. In any of these centers, the sign should be in front of your business location.
It's a walkway, it's
And-
not really a sidewalk. It's a
Right,
walkway.
in the sidewalk that's immediately adjacent to your business, unless you don't have a sidewalk immediately adjacent. But even if you're saying, I guess, Jeremy, I didn't fully understand the impact of this. Like even with vintage wine, there's got to be a place they can put it in close proximity to their business. But I agree with the mayor, it doesn't belong out on the street, in any place. I don't care if it's DeQuesta Drive, US 1, any of the locations, it should not be out at the street. It should be in proximity to the business itself.
Our code now allows for the
5 feet.
sandwich board signs be within 5 feet of in front of the building, so we allow for that now.
Right.
This was something that was asked for from the previous workshop, so, it's obviously, it's whatever council's direction wants staff to go with it.
I'm in tone to agree with you, Mayor, that, and everyone else. I mean, you come down to Quest Drive, you take the plaza here, just catty corner across from where we're at today, and you've got all those different businesses and stuff with the sandwich boards and stuff out there along Quest Drive. I mean, it would be unattractive, and it could even potentially be a safety hazard. If somebody did drive off the edge of the sidewalk and hit one of the signs, it could fly. I mean, there's all sorts of different implications and stuff that could come up, with having the availability of all those different businesses to have signs out there. And of course, the conversation that comes back to me is back when she was talking about her coffee shop out there on Dixie. And how her business had dropped by 30% when we made her take her sign and stuff down. So that got my sympathy up for her, because anybody that's struggling, during these difficult times, you have a soft heart, trying to work with them and trying to accommodate them any way you can to help them survive, this COVID situation and stuff that we're in. And that's where I initially became more interested in exploring different opportunities and stuff to help benefit the businesses in any way that we could and relax some of our code restrictions in regards to these sandwich signs. But so far as having them out along the highway, I mean, you think about it from that perspective, and you have them lined up all up and down the roads and stuff. I just don't think, and I agree with you, that that's necessarily the way to go. I would like to maybe explore some other opportunities and stuff, to help the businesses, compensate for their lack of visibility and to be able to create, more traffic, visibility for them. Because a lot of them don't have the ability to really have a good signage up. You've got multiple signs all on the marquee board stuff, and, we all know that we go by those and you're only going to see one or two of them at a time. So I don't know what the solution is, but I don't think that this is the solution for the city to move forward with, in my opinion.
I would agree. I think you're right. The key is visibility and awareness.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Sandwich boards out by the street aren't going to do it. And the idea is once you're in a plaza and you're walking through,
Yeah.
you're trying to capture somebody's attention to say, oh, well, maybe I'll stop in this store today. That's really the intent of the signage. It's not to draw people in from the street. There's other approaches and other things
Yeah.
that can be done to bring people in from the street.
Jerry, you just want to touch on the meeting and what the four different, we were focusing on four different things for the businesses and the committees that are being formed. Because I think what may happen there is there's going to be a lot more bang for your buck if we can push some of those things, or they can push those things along.
Yeah, I mean, specifically sign wasn't addressed in that meeting, but they want to focus, the businesses think that we should focus on branding, communication, marketing, and special events that will really help them. And so, it's to be determined what all of those encompass as far as communication. It could come back to signage, but at this point it hasn't went in that direction. But so there are some ideas out there on how the village can help some of these businesses, and it doesn't necessarily relate to signage. So we'll see how that conversation develops. The next meeting will be on the 23rd with that group, and they've kind of appointed somebody for each one of those categories to kind of lead the charge and what that means to them. So we'll further those discussions as we get to the 23rd.
Thank you. I believe that's really where we can make a difference. They can make a difference and not just littering the village with sandwich boards. Are we in agreement that we're going to let this one go? I think that we stay with the code. Vice Mayor, I'm sorry, I have to remember to call on you, but
I appreciate it. I'll just add a couple of things real quick, if you don't mind. I think that, I appreciate the staff taking the time to look into this. This was brought to our attention when we started to enforce the code. And there was a period of 8 years or so where a particular sandwich board was not identified as out of code. And that's just kind of where we are now, is we allow this new business to come in and get started and get established, and we didn't have a way of I guess, holding that code into force. So until now, which is I'm glad we're doing, and I'm glad we looked at it, and I'm glad we talked about it. I would agree that I don't think we quite have a solution right now, because none of us want signs all over the place that could potentially be an eyesore.
If I may,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that Father Doug is on. I see him, and he was one that was wanting to speak about the sign. I don't know if he still does, especially after where we are now, but he was very concerned because he was one that got cited for an A-frame or a sandwich board sign. So I don't know if you want to give him an opportunity or not, but I see that he's online.
Are you interested in speaking, Father?
Yeah, if I could just make one comment. I'm trying to pull up the ordinance as it is currently stated. But I think as Jeremy mentioned, it says something about 5 feet from the entrance to the building. And, our church property is oriented around a courtyard. So technically our entrances are some distance from, the front of our building as it approaches Seabrook. So I'm wondering if one solution might be to simply make a change to, rather than reference the entrance to, you know, the building, or the property line or something like that, so that, you know, we would be able to place a sign towards the front of our building, as opposed to, you know, further up towards the technical entrance. That might be a fix for those of us that have buildings that are not oriented towards the street.
And I think that is something that's a lot of the businesses are talking about, but what we're saying then is it's okay, or you're requesting that we would put it down towards the right-of-way, if you will, but inside of the right-of-way. And I hate for just to single out the church or a business, but I think that we can't do it unless we do it for everyone. It just can't be done. Now, I'm trying to remember, because it's a big church, I mean, you pretty much can see your church, I think. Is there some type of a sign on the lawn itself, an actual sign, or is it just, how is it identified at the church?
So we have a single marquee that says Good Shepherd Episcopal Church and School. And the signage that we were requesting was for our thrift store, which is also on our property, which is not indicated on the marquee. So, and that's part of our outreach, is connected to our food pantry and other ministries. So that was specifically what we were cited for, was that sign.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, that there's no frontage on Seabrook for the thrift store or any of our entrances, because again, we're oriented towards the courtyard. So none of our doors are visible from the street, and so that's why we put the sign closer to the roadway. It was still near our building, but it was not near the technical entrance, and so that's where technically we were in violation of the ordinance. I think a lot of our businesses at least face the street, most of them do, where none of our entrances even have that sort of visibility.
Yes, sir.
I think Father Doug's request makes total sense in the aspect of the way the structure of the building is, and having a sign within, call it 10 feet, 5 feet of that structure would make total sense. Right now, you allow 5 feet from the front door, but what if we let it 5 feet within that property line or property building, the building structure itself?
Or if I'm not mistaken, Pennies for Heaven has been a part of that church for a long time.
Yes.
Why not just add it to your marquee, since it's been there for a long time and you don't plan on, you know, losing it? It's such a wonderful part of your church and community, and you guys do so much with it. Why not include it, and it becomes a regular site as well, and people become more well-known to it?
Well, it's hours change, and there are some times where there are particular events or things connected to that we want to highlight. So if you've seen the sign, it's a professionally printed sign with our logo and color scheme. It meets the requirements of the code. It's just technically the 5 or 10 feet from the door, the entrance of the building, is not something that we can comply with because of the orientation of our buildings. So when you're concerned with like US 1, if they were 5 to 10 feet from their buildings, they're still up near their businesses, because their buildings are not that close to the roadway. Our building is close to the roadway, it's not technically our door. And so that was our request, so that we could have some visibility for that signage close to our building, but obviously it can't be near the door.
Do you have a freestanding marquee sign out in front of the church now?
It's a permanent sign, but yes, it is disconnected from the building, yeah.
I mean, the thrift store, I've actually been in your thrift store, by the way, and y'all got some really great things and stuff in there, and I'm sure it's a benefit to the church. And, but on the note of that, I mean, could you do, maybe try to get a permit to do an additional sign that would attach to your main marquee sign, something that would just hang off the end of it, off of each side or something, designating the fact that you've got a thrift store there on site? Just as an idea.
That's kind of what I meant as well. Have the name of Pennies from Heaven on your marquee, and then when they pull into the property, you can use the thrift store building, even have a plaque on the side of the building as the details of what it is, what you guys do, and then have it to where you can design it where you can change the hours. I do know you guys change the hours based on your volunteers and whatnot. But at least that way they go into the property, to the building, then they can look at the details, much like they would when they go to your church. They're gonna go up to the door, and then we're gonna see the listing on the window of when your service times are.
Well, I mean, we could look into that, but we were, trying to avoid redoing our entire sign or going through that permitting process. So that sign's been there since the church was built 15 years ago. And I take it was the largest sign that could be approved under the code. So we thought the simplest and most aesthetically pleasing option was just the temporary sign that was brought out in the morning. It's there for 4 or 5 hours and then brought back in as the ordinance dictates.
Yeah.
Well, currently the ordinance is 5 feet from the outside of the building. Is 5 feet outside of the church? That's nowhere near enough from what you would like to see.
Well, is the ordinance 5 feet from the building or 5 feet from the entrance of the building? Because I think that's what we were cited for, was that it was not 5 feet from the entrance. And that's our contention, is that our entrances are not oriented towards the road. So if we put it 5 feet from the entrance, it's not even visible from the road.
Right.
And we don't have any pedestrian, we don't fall into the same category as, say, Gallery Square, where you have pedestrian traffic. So as the point was made, in a strip mall, you're really appealing to those who have already in some way made the decision to come in there to do business, and you're trying to, catch additional shoppers as they are walking past or maybe going to another business. We don't have any pedestrian traffic, so the only way people know that we exist is by being able to have some signage, oriented at least to some degree to Seabrook Road. And none of our entrances are visible from Seabrook Road. So my suggestion was, rather than the code referencing the entrance, it would just reference the building. And maybe it does, but that's not the way we were cited, because we were more than 5 feet from the entrance, I believe.
You make a good argument. I mean, I think that he's got a pretty valid argument to the fact that the way that your building is actually constructed. I mean, it makes you virtually impossible to be able to have any useful signage, with it written the way that it is currently. I don't know what the solution
So my
is.
suggestion would be if that could be researched, because this is a workshop, right? So it's not, there's no vote being taken, is that correct, or?
That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah. And perhaps the change to the ordinance, rather than making it as flexible as what was presented tonight, which I agree could result in a lot of additional signage far from buildings. If it was oriented to the building as opposed to the entrance, that might help those of us that don't have buildings that are oriented towards roadways.
Keith, the current code doesn't require 5 feet from the entrance, does it? I thought it required that it simply be in front of the business location.
It's in front of the business, no more than 5 feet from the entrance.
From the entrance, okay. All right.
Yes, all of your entrances are actually around the back. I understand what you're saying, Father. I don't think your mic's on, Keith.
So that might be a compromise solution to deal with the language of entrance and stick with the language of building. And I think that would solve the problem in terms of your concern about, because let's take, where Perk is, or any one of those businesses, they'd have to keep it near their building, which is far, a good distance from the sidewalk and the right-of-way onto Cuesta Drive. And you see what I'm saying? So I think that might be one way to handle both your concern, but also address the needs of those that have buildings that are close to the road, but just our entrance isn't close to the road.
Yes, I hear what you're saying.
We'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
See if we can research it and vet it and make sure there's not something we're not thinking about. And
Right.
we'll bring it back to you guys if it's viable.
Okay, but I think at this point, Jeremy, I don't think we want to move any further on this ordinance. I believe that we'll keep it. But yes, if you can there's some way to say that maybe it's the freestanding building that allows it for whatever reason, instead of, you can't have, yeah. It's a tough one, Father.
I think you can carve out, like you said, a common sense, whether you want to call it an exception, an addendum, or whatever, that would allow for, as you said earlier, a little flexibility. The other thing I wanted to mention, we talked about this once before with respect to signs, but with the sandwich board signs, in order to keep the process simple and for everybody to know who's approved and not, we talked about little stickers maybe, because they have to permit every year, right? Maybe we could do a little sticker that could go on the corner of the board that says, hey, you're approved.
Currently, I don't think we have a permit process.
Current code does not require sandwich boards to get permits.
Okay, I thought, all right.
Mayor, if I could interject for a second, we have another person that would like to speak whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. Anything more from council? All right, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am?
It's Beth Long.
Okay, Ms. Long, would you like to speak?
Hello there. I'm the Penny's manager, so actually Father Doug has done a very nice job of, of talking about just the frustration of our building and how we're a little bit unique compared to the others. So he pretty much summed that up, but I'm glad that I was able to hear you guys discuss it. It's interesting. It kind of makes you see the whole picture, but it would certainly be helpful for us because you are right in saying that Pennies for Heaven has been there actually 50 years this year. But I was brought on about a year and a half ago, and we've completely changed the game of our little thrift store. And it would be super helpful if we had some kind of independent sign that wasn't really incorporated with the main sign with the Good Shepherd services, because then it gets all muddled with everything that's already on. And if I'm not mistaken, Father Doug, don't we usually have other messages on our reader board out there as well?
We do, yeah.
Oh, they could add it. Right.
Mayor, if I'm sorry to interject, so what would the timeline be for that decision or that conversation to take place?
I would look to our attorney and our manager. They said they would take a look at it. I'm not quite sure. It's hard to have a time certain on that. I'm not sure I'm sure they'll look at it as soon as they can.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for your time tonight. Appreciate all that you're doing for us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, anything else on this topic?
No, ma'am.
All right, let's move on to number 2, which is the consideration for mobile food trucks, and I believe Nilsa is going to be presenting this.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm gonna remove my mask. The memo that is in front of you has an explanation of the definitions, Florida statutes, our current code. Just to start, I want to mention that July 1st, 2020, it was Florida statute adopted amended section 509.102, including new regulations with regard to the food trucks. So those are included on the memo. Basically, currently, the village have two interested parties to install food trucks in the village in 2 different locations. So the code right now, the existing code, includes a language with regard to trailers. So just to have a general understanding, a food truck could be self-propelled, or could be a trailer truck, or could be even a hot dog cart, or a sandwich, lunch type of truck. So there are different types, but they are all under, we could all agree with the definition of food trucks, as I explained in the memo. So our current village code has language that says basically prohibits the trailers in the properties. So that is on page 3 of the memo. It says the current village code will benefit to include a specific language regarding mobile food truck. Currently, the code provides the following section regarding trailers, section 78:612. So, trailers shall be prohibited in all zoning districts. Then, just to make sure what was the definition of a trailer, I searched the definition on the code and includes merchandise of any kind. So currently, our code really doesn't allow this type of food trailers to be located in any of the properties zoning designations in the village. So I look at many other municipalities, what do they, their regulations with regard to mobile food trucks, and I propose some ideas, some examples for the council to think about it and to let us know how would you like to include this type of uses in the different zoning districts, residential, commercial. We can go one by one.
Well, I think I'd like Keith to talk a little bit about the change in the law at the state level and how, I did read through your review, but just so everybody's on the same page, including anybody who's watching, what that change does, what we can or cannot do, and I'm interested in that specifically as it applies to any of these different zoning districts as well.
Sure. Mayor and council, so currently village code does not address food trucks. We're silent on the topic. In 2020, a state law was passed that preempted certain regulatory pieces for food trucks to the state. Really says there's two parts to it. The first thing, any kind of permit or registration or fee that's associated with a permit or registration is preempted to the state. So the appropriate state licensing agency licenses food trucks, and a local jurisdiction cannot have their own local registration or permit or fees associated with those sorts of things. That's the first thing we cannot do. The second thing we cannot do is impose a blanket prohibition, thou shalt not have food trucks in Tequesta. We can't do that either. Other than that, within those two prohibitions, we can impose reasonable regulations on food trucks. We can talk about hours of operation, which zoning districts they're not appropriate in, or which zoning districts they are. There's different kinds of food trucks now. You know, state law has a pretty broad definition and doesn't break it into classes. But you see the memo that I wrote, best practices kind of breaks it into there's the kind that where you actually cook the food in the truck and sell it, and there's the kind where it's more prepared food. Did this shut off?
Yes,
Yeah.
it did. Yeah.
Okay, and then there's the kind that, where you sort of just sell prepared sandwiches and that sort of thing out of the truck. And then some places even add a third category, the quote-unquote traditional ice cream truck that you see playing the music and driving down the
Right.
street. So you can impose different types of regulations in different zoning districts for the different categories of food truck. You can do those sorts of things. As Nilsa indicated, the one thing that's in the village's code right now, we have code that deals with trailers. And what that code says is you're not allowed to have a trailer in any commercial zoning district for any period of time unless it's specifically allowed. So the issue with the two applicants who have wanted to put food trucks in the two different places is they're both trailers.
Mm-hmm.
Our code it doesn't matter what you're doing with the trailer. If you're selling something out of it, if you're operating an office out of it, if you're storing, it doesn't matter. Trailer's not allowed. So that's been the primary issue with these permit applications is they're trailers.
Does the state preempt them?
Well, again, the state defines food truck.
So it could be a trailer if it
Yes.
was by the state. Okay, that's what
But
I'm,
our code doesn't allow any trailer.
right.
So
Are we talking about trailer parking overnight or just coming in and doing
it
business?
says intermittent or permanent parking it's both. Unless it's permitted, it's not permitted.
Gotcha.
Our existing code is what you're saying.
Our
Yes.
current code.
But apparently, by what you're saying, what the state has come in is that we cannot use that
Well,
if it has to do with food.
it's entirely likely that the state's definition of a food truck captures these trailers, which doesn't change the fact that our current code doesn't allow any trailers that are used for any purpose. And again, what we can't do is say, no food trucks anywhere under any circumstances. That's what you can't do, and we don't do that. You're not allowed to have a trailer, but you could have other kinds of food trucks that are self-propelled. And what you think in your head of a food truck, that you drive up, you do your thing, and then you drive away at night. I don't think under any circumstance, certainly not under our current code, and even with the state definition, that we would be required to allow these trailers to park in a parking lot,
And stay-
operate for some period of hours during the day, and stay there overnight. There is absolutely nothing in our code that allows that, and there's nothing in the state law that in my opinion, anybody could lean on to allow that either.
So the fact that they define food truck broadly, which includes trailers, we would not run amiss of that if we were to continue to disallow trailers.
That is my opinion, yes.
The health and safety issue, in terms of operations, who does that fall to? Obviously, we're not out there inspecting and certifying, but who does that fall into?
So the
with this
state,
change?
handles all of that certification. The one thing that I believe we could do is require, and I think Nils has looked at this as well, like the fire department to come in and make sure NFPA codes are being followed, but
Currently, the fire department is inspecting the food trucks. When we have our events, the food truck once a month event, the fire chief, they do inspect those food trucks.
But other than that, there's really, in terms of, is the food being prepared to health department standards and all that, that is all preempted to the state at this point.
It is.
So
I'm sorry, Bruce, go ahead.
I apologize, too. So let me make sure I understand it. So the state license any food truck for the whole state. In other words, if I wanted to sell food out of a truck or a trailer, then I've got to go to the state, get it certified, inspected, make sure that I'm being compliant with all the Food and Drug Administration requirements and be able to cook or prepare any type of food and stuff. And all of those licensing and fees all go to the state.
Correct.
Okay. And then so what we do is the state's taking care of all the requirements and stuff and the safety of it, and then making sure they're in compliance and stuff with all the food regulatory obligations.
That's correct.
And so we have allowed food trucks, but the only thing is that we just don't allow trailers. Is what I'm understanding?
Well, we're silent on the issue right now. Our code doesn't address it at all.
Oh, it
Our
doesn't?
code for a
But
long
we-
time has prohibited trailer parking.
But we've had food trucks here for quite some time, so we allowed, well, we
For
do
the
have
events,
food trucks.
as a
Special
special
events.
events, yes,
Only at special events.
exactly. There is a
They're
difference.
invited.
Okay.
And that is not an uncommon way to address certain aspects of food truck use. It's not uncommon to see a special event permit to, especially if it's going to be more than one, just pulling up to a place and operating. If it's going to be more than one, at some type, to require a special event permit in that circumstance.
So we've had people that wanted to come in here and bring their food trucks or food trailers in here and open up a operation, if you will, and sell food and stuff at a designated location. Is that the reason why this is on the table? I mean, what brought it all aboard, to the forefront?
Well, I think that, number one, the change in state law, and then we've got these two applicants who want to park their trailers in commercial parking lots and operate as a food truck.
On a permanent basis.
My understanding is the ask was to park the trailer, I don't want to say permanently, because that connotates forever, but
Well, yeah.
more than, not in it, but be allowed to park it, leave it overnight, come back the next day, open it up, operate it, close it, come back the next, as opposed to taking it away every night. That's my understanding of what the ask was. And again,
This would be out in the open, in the commercial area. If they were parking a trailer or a truck, it's out in the open where everyone can see it overnight.
So the one, from my understanding, was at the parking lot of the old Judy's Cafe on US 1, and the other was under the old bank drive-through there at Gallery Square North.
Gotcha. My issue with that is we have residents that have utility trailers that they run, it's a part of their business, whether they have tools or supplies in it. They are not allowed to put that on their property unless it's fully covered.
Right.
So then I have an issue allowing a company or a couple or whatever it is coming in with a whole commercial truck or trailer. But we won't even let a resident have a small utility trailer that might just have a logo on the side of it.
Well, and the opinion that I've rendered in discussing this with community development and administration is that they're not allowed, and we've not allowed them to operate for all those reasons.
So Keith, other than a total prohibition, it sounds like we have a wide degree of latitude here in terms of what we choose to permit or not to permit.
So you can deal with things like hours of operation, setbacks, how trash is handled. You don't want to interfere with pedestrian or motor vehicle traffic.
But we could continue to prohibit, can we, let me ask those a question. Can we continue to prohibit trailers if we so chose? Can we continue to prohibit overnight parking if we so choose?
My opinion is that, yes, you absolutely can prohibit overnight parking. Because again, the idea of these food trucks is that they are mobile and they're designed to come and go. They're not meant to be parked and stored.
Yeah, in my experience is the people with trailers, when they make these applications, it's just what Lori said, is that they want to set up a permanent, more or less a permanent restaurant with that food truck, and their intention is to leave it there for the foreseeable future and simply operate out of there instead of out of a fixed building.
I mean, my view is that, and I think we need to probably address this in our code at this time, but my view in terms of the trailers is that the best case for a trailer is you bring it in the morning, operate it, and take it away when you're finished operating, when the hours of operation are done. You can't leave it there. That would be the best case scenario. And again, what zoning districts and when and all of that is certainly up to the council. But in terms of trailers specifically, I don't see a path that would allow, I mean, unless the council said, we're going to allow you to park your trailers permanently overnight in a commercial parking lot.
I'd like to see it even a little bit more to where a mobile business like that should be invited in, whether it's for not just a special event, but let's say the art gallery's having an exhibition and they want to serve hors d'oeuvres or drinks or something. They have a food truck or trailer come in to help assist with that extra accessory, essentially. But I have an issue with any business that has a mobile ability to just come into the Cuesta and take away from our brick and mortar without being invited, essentially. And then they stay overnight. And the overnight, I definitely am not in favor of.
Well, to your point on that, Lori, I mean, I think if they're parking like Gallery North or some of these other locations, it would appear that the landlord and that individual have already discussed that, and they've already, in essence, I think, received an invite. But the question is, what does that invite really entail, to your point? Which is, if it's only for a day, no overnight, those are restrictions, as I understand it, we can put in place.
And also, from what I understand, you can't take away from mandatory parking. So, for instance, the previous Judy's, I forget the new name there, they don't have enough parking as it is, from what I understand. They never did, anyway. And so if you allowed that to come in, now you're taking away from what they're required to have for parking. Is that correct?
Yes, it's very important to look at the existing zoning regulations, such as parking, where this truck will park, either a trailer or a self-propelled food truck, where it will park, and even where the customers that come to buy from them, where will they park? Is it safe? For example, US 1, people coming and going, I don't know, So safety is very important, hours of operation, bathrooms, which bathrooms they will use. So there are a number of criteria that I detail on the memo that we truly need to take a look, because in this case, they were 2 trailers. But in any moment, we will get the self-propelled, the truck itself. And the code doesn't have any language with regard to that.
Right. I'll invite the Vice Mayor in at this time so that we don't... Vice Mayor, do you have some things to talk about?
No, I appreciate where the discussion is, and I agree with all the sentiment that the council's stating. I do want to remember, I guess there was a food truck that was parking behind Vintage again, and they were in compliance because they were leaving every day.
Right.
Can someone talk about that, because that's kind of what's going on?
This
That's the case.
this is the one that we thought it was an alley, but it isn't. It's an alley, but it is not a right-of-way, so we weren't able to do anything about that there. And then they were coming in, and I think, is that self-propelled? Do you remember?
It was, yep.
It was self-propelled, so they would drive in and basically and they weren't competing with Gallery Grill, for instance, because they were coming in the evenings on certain nights. And they would stay back there. And I thought since we didn't have anything on the books, we didn't have any teeth in that particular.
And as I've indicated, the significant part of the opinion that I've formulated in this case is that both of these are trailers. They're not self-propelled. If these were self-propelled, I'd be looking at a different situation, probably more akin to the one that Mr. Stone just brought up.
I have another question. In our code, it does say that you can't have a commercial vehicle if it's a truck, because we have residents that get cited for having a truck with a company logo on the side of it. You know, it's a pickup truck.
Yes.
So no commercial at all.
Yeah, I believe, you're allowed, a commercial vehicle can come in, do its
Yeah,
delivery
that's
or
legal.
perform its service and then leave. But if it's the resident's vehicle, then we either require them to have it in the garage or in carport or whatever, or cover the commercial indicia, whether it's with a magnet or to cover the lettering and things like that. So that is correct.
Referencing what the mayor just said, I think protectionism isn't allowed, so whether it competes or not, I don't think is actually something we can consider. Is
That
correct?
cannot be a motivating factor, and
Cannot.
there's, the court cases on that issue and have kind of come down interesting. In terms of distance separation from a brick and mortar food service establishment, they've basically said 500 feet is too big of a number, but 200 feet is acceptable. And I mean, there's a court case out of Fort Pierce that talks about the 500 feet, and it references a case from somewhere else, I don't recall off the top of my head where, that acknowledged that 200 feet was acceptable. So that seems to be kind of where the court cases are falling. If you look at the National League of Cities best practices, they've recognized that 200 foot is probably the furthest away that you can legislate in terms of distance separation.
Are there any legal liabilities that city would encumber should it, there be an accident, accessing the food truck or the food trailer, pedestrians and stuff, tripping over, getting from their car to the food truck or trailer, what have you? I mean, do we have some sort of legal responsibility to make sure that, that they're parking in a safe spot like, the mayor was talking about earlier? I just a little bit concerned that, should we even consider this, the legal liabilities and stuff that we would potentially exposing ourselves to by allowing this to happen?
Well, I don't think by virtue of it being a food truck, it changes our exposure. I mean, generally, we still have we have a responsibility to reasonably maintain, you know, the rights of way in a safe condition, the sidewalks, curbs, parking. You know, we would, if you adopted regulations, we have code enforcement that keeps an eye on those things, and we would take the.
So that would go
That's a
along
really
with part
good
of the
question.
application process if they wanted to go to Judy's, for example. I mean, that's one that you had mentioned, and go up there and examine the location of which they're wanting to set up at, make sure they're in compliance with all the, you know, the handicap accessibility and things like that. I mean, I don't know what all the parameters may ultimately would be, but I would think that if you were gonna go set up a brick and mortar, there's a lot of criteria that you have to abide by in order to sell a hamburger out of a building. So, I mean, so does that circumvent their responsibilities of being able to park a food truck or a trailer in a parking lot? I mean, there's gotta be rules and regulations that's gonna keep.
Before you answer, I know when
compliant.
I do a special event and we invite, say, a food trailer in, we do have to turn in for permitting for liability, and it's under the insurance of the property owner. So if there is something to happen, if the person is walking to the food truck and they hurt
Exactly.
themselves, it comes down on the property owner.
Right.
So with a special event, we have special event permits, and we have insurance requirements and indemnification provisions. But if you're just talking about the individual single food truck, we're no longer allowed to require them to apply for a permit. We can't require them to do any of those things at the local level anymore. The state has preempted all regulatory. We can't make them apply. We can't make them pay any kind of application fee or go through any of that.
So the only thing that we can do, then, if I'm understanding you correctly, is either allow them or not allow them to come in
No,
and
you
set
can't.
up an operation.
Well, and you can't even wholesale not allow them. You can carve out areas and circumstances, but you can't say no food trucks in Tequesta. That you're not
We can
allowed to
regulate
do.
it, but we can't prohibit it.
Yeah, I don't wanna say none, because we all enjoy them.
So you regulate it how then?
One thing that I've been preparing is that we can have a checklist. For example, here is if we receive a food truck, we can check if that food truck has the license from the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation. We can check it has the license from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Service. If we decide to do the fire safety, you see like these boxes, I can check because we have to look at it that they have all the licenses from the state. So I think to have a checklist will be very useful. And also, for example, if we, what will be the hours of operation, where will be park, require a sketch, little graphics to show us where they will park the trailer or the food truck, the self-propel. So, but this is not a permit, it's just a checklist.
Neil, so when Mayor Brennan said, our regular brick and mortars require a certain amount of parking and this and that, where in Tequesta do we even have room for any of these to even come in and have access for plenty of room without taking away from the brick and mortar? We don't have a lot of open space.
Well, the thing is, we don't have regulations in our code right now. But in the case, for example, of Gallery Square North, the trailer that we are talking, they were proposed to park under the canopy. So that is not a parking space. They cannot park on a parking space that is required for the brick and mortar.
Okay.
It sounds like Nilsen and Keith, you guys have done a fair bit of research, and my sense of what you're looking for from us is just a little guidance. So, for example, if a trailer is mobile and it can be moved in and out every night, or moved in and out, is there really any distinction between a trailer and a self-propelled vehicle? So do we want to allow both? And then it sounds like, again, some of the other elements that have been discussed here, you guys, as you said, you've looked at some of the best practices, you've looked at what some of the other municipalities have done. So it sounds like to me you guys have a fairly good idea of what an ordinance properly crafted should look like. I'm in favor of it, and Keith, you're encouraging us to go ahead and move forward now with this, given what the state's done. So it seems to me to make sense that we should be looking for you guys to come back based on our conversation, with a proposal that we can review.
I don't think the issue is going to get any easier. I don't think that food trucks are going away. I think it's time to put something on the books that gives us a handle on this so we know what and where and when and how, to the extent that we can, under the current statutory preemptions.
Yeah, I think it's clear none of us want anything that's permanent in the sense that it resides overnight.
Well, that I certainly agree with you on that. I mean, I don't think that anything should be a permanent, trailer or a mobile food truck. Coming in and out and stuff, one thing, but setting up a shop and leveling it all up and making it a permanent structure and stuff, I don't necessarily agree with it. I mean, I can't speak for everyone else, just myself, but
I agree with that. If someone wants to be essentially permanent, they should just acquire one of our empty retail spots. We have plenty of them.
But I don't see where we should really differentiate between a mobile trailer or a self-propelled, food truck. Hook up to a pickup truck or whatever vehicle he wants to and drag it in and out and stuff. So, I mean, I don't see any difference between one or the other.
Well, and to your point, again, the state law definition captures all of the above. It's
Yeah.
just that
You
our
can't-
code currently
Doesn't allow
prohibits the
trailers.
trailers.
Yeah.
Right. And we can't do that if it is used for food, correct?
Yeah, I would,
We really shouldn't be
I
doing
would,
it.
one of the things we would do in preparing code would be to
Incorporate
amend
that.
that
Differentiate
provision
that.
to
Mhm.
conform with
Right.
state law.
Did we want to ask Kyle if he's?
But we did. Yeah,
We might have some
Yeah.
removals.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, guys. My only concern is, in addition to what you guys have mentioned, is the operating hours not being 24 hours, for obvious reasons.
right.
Yeah, if they can't stay overnight, I don't think they can operate 24 hours. So.
No, but that's a good point.
But
You know,
yes,
that's
yes.
a very good.
But
But if
Mr.
they come in saying they want to operate for 24 hours, and I don't know, I mean, we don't want to code there based on, they have to leave after operating hours.
I'm of the opinion that the village can set reasonable hours of operation.
Right, right. Is there, let me ask if there's anybody on the line at this time before we invite some of the guests. Is there anyone on the Zoom line, Brad, that wishes to speak on this topic? Excuse me, I'm waiting for the Zoom to come through. I'm sorry. Just a moment. I'm going to definitely. No, that's okay. I was waiting for Brad to answer me, but I haven't
There's
heard him.
nobody else on the line.
There's nobody else? Okay.
Other than staff.
Thank you. Yes, if you would like to speak to this, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
My name is Vincent Petzino.
Could you speak into the mic?
Sure. My name is Vincent Petzino, and I am one of the persons that have been requesting to have a trailer. It's an Airstream trailer that serves coffee. I appreciate everybody's conception of what, what things were food trucks, and I'm a bit biased because I love the Airstream trailer. It's a 1971, I think someone provided a picture of it.
Yes.
But, and I would just like to point out a couple things. The code that's being referenced actually is fairly specific about structures or vehicles used for storage purposes. That's what it says in the code 2 times. If you read through the code,
Yeah.
it's for storage. And the Airstream trailer is a coffee truck. It's been built out, it has live edge wood in it, and it was pre-COVID, so that it was able for people to go in it. But Eric Peterson has a place that would be able to house this piece, it's actually a piece of art, that could go underneath the overhang of the bank, and by code, it would not exceed any intensifying of the building or the parking, because it would only require 1 parking space. And Eric has assured me he has at least 1 to allocate towards this unit. So my request is to take a look at this code to see that it does reference storage units, and I did drive around a little bit. If you look around Tequesta, there are there are trailers all over the place for storage. Your water authority has them, your police department has them, they're all over the place. So, I mean, and I gotta be honest with you, if we're not welcome, we prefer not to be here, but I really think that if you had an opportunity to see what would, the benefits of this, it's not a food truck, it is a trailer, but it's kind of, it's a vintage trailer that has a lot of panache to it. It could be a lot of fun. I think, I actually emailed the town manager and Keith, and I said, why don't you take a shot and just give it a 6-month try? See, you might get the feedback. I think you get the public involved. See what they say about it. They may say, man, we really love this thing. There's other communities and municipalities that are welcoming them all over the place. It has all its own, it could have its own water, it has its own waste, and it has its own electric. It also has the ability to use what's on site. It could be a combination of. My proposal was I could have, there's minimal waste that comes out of the coffee shop. It's basically water. So there's not going to be a lot of waste. We have a tank that would get pumped out once a month.
Have you set this up somewhere else before?
Okay, I'm also the owner of, in Jupiter, there's a building called Ferrovia. It's on the corner of Center Street and Old Dixie. And that is going to be the brick and mortar for the coffee shop. We did have it in Jupiter. We were there for a while.
Were you over there off Center Street?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember seeing it there on Center Street, there on the left, going to the west there. I believe that was yours. Is
Yes.
that one you're referencing
Yes.
to? Yeah. So is that the first place you had set it up at once you had gotten it built for this?
The first place was down on Center Street. It was down a little bit, 312 Center Street. My building is 105. We actually ran into a little pushback with the town because I had it on the side of the building while I was building out the building, because
Right.
technically we could have done that because that's what we were putting in there was a coffee shop.
Right.
However, we had, with the COVID and all this, I put 2 grease traps in that had to go down the side of the building, and I had to move the trailer. So it just turned into a much longer endeavor with the grease trap contractor. He ran into some problems. Our town of Jupiter was, their system was breached, and there was paperwork that was lost. So, there was a combination of things that happened there that turned it into a much longer period of time where it wasn't in a perfect spot. I think that the place that I'm proposing on the Petersons' property underneath that overhang could be an absolute phenomenal spot. And it's not going to intensify their use. It would probably fit in perfectly with the whole art scene over there. And
I have a question.
Well, I will say this,
Sorry, I have several.
I will say this, that I had heard from a couple of different people that you had done a really nice job over there on the renovation of that building, and they were looking forward to you getting it opened up and moving forward with that. So I have heard some very positive feedback about what you were attempting to do over there off Center Street.
thank you. I had a lot of fun doing it. It took me a long time, but I enjoyed myself. And I invite you all to come and see it.
So I'm actually really glad you did come in, because I already had several questions for you before we even started this meeting. First is, you are building a brick and mortar, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the need for having a secondary location for the locomotive? Can't you just put it back behind the brick and mortar, if you're gonna be putting the business in the brick and mortar?
Well, the brick and mortar it's gonna be a coffee shop and a bakery. That's what's gonna be inside of it, so I wouldn't want it on that property. It's not, inside is where it's gonna be. The part of the Airstream elsewhere is just as if another coffee shop opened up another cafe. There's many, hate to use them as an example, but Starbucks, they've got multiple cafes.
Okay, and on social media, I did see that it was commented that you were opening the brick and mortar very soon, whatever that means. Do you have a date?
I don't have a date because of COVID, because I just feel that first impressions mean a lot. So I'm not sure, and I'm very optimistic that it could be very busy. And with that in mind, I don't want to have a problem with people and too many people being around. There's been a lot of people not wearing masks lately, so there's some things that I'm sorting out with that. And to clarify, I'd like to tell you that it's my kids that run the coffee business. And they do a great job. They're very passionate about what they do. From making their coffee, to roasting coffee. It's something that they love to do. It's not a job for them. And my dad used to tell me, if you find something you love to do, you never have to work another day in your life.
Right.
So,
Now, if anyone knows me, they know that I am a vintage girl. Totally. I love the Airstream. I love vintage vehicles as well. However, I want to know what your mindset is for why you chose to go underneath that bank overhang, especially when most of the community response is that you guys have like that surfery, down-to-earth feel. Why would you not try to push to be more near the beach, say near Love Street? Is it because that's Jupiter and you guys have had issues with Jupiter with having the Airstream?
No, not really. I mean, we're gonna have a place in Jupiter. The ultimate goal is I'm gonna build out more Airstreams and build out other brick and mortars. The building on the corner, the Ferrovia building that I rebuilt, was, if you saw pictures of it prior, everybody wanted to just knock it down. I'm a vintage guy, that's what I do. I'm in the structural concrete repair business, and I saw that as an opportunity to keep an old building in Jupiter and not take it down, leave it, just redo it. And there were some things that I did over there that the town actually loved. It was a great idea. I moved one of the walls back, so I created a bigger walkway for pedestrians. They're outside yet inside. My son always says, my dad, it's like he had a crystal ball. That place is built for COVID. There's garage doors where you could walk up to it and be outside. And it's the same thing with this Airstream trailer. Nobody would go in it. Coffee would be served out of a window.
You just extended on my point, though, is that the one Airstream that you're asking to put into Cuesta is not going to be your only source. It is not going to be your bread and butter by itself. That's my point.
Yes.
And I
you're
appreciate you
correct.
extending on that. You will have other,
Yes,
thank you.
yes. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Or you redid the building next to Ralph's stand-up bar?
Yes.
Okay, did a good job on that too, by the way, I think so, anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank
you did an outstanding job on that building. I think the challenge in a situation like this is, unfortunately, it's one of those things that we deal with all the time, is that in passing an ordinance or structuring an ordinance, as extraordinary, I know, as you feel your situation is, we can't craft something for a one-off situation. We have to craft something, that is in the best interest of our businesses, but also in the best interest of the public and what it is that they look to us to do in terms of guiding and managing the business, the village's affairs. So, again, if we allow you to permanently park there, we have to allow everybody to permanently park. And I think that is a grave concern that we would have, even though your situation might be extraordinary. Again, once we do it for one, we have to do it for all, and that creates a difficulty for us, because not everybody is going to have the backdrop or the story that you have, and that is always a challenge. I tend to run libertarian, so I always want to minimize government interference in private affairs to the extent it is possible. But again, that's always balanced against the needs of the community and what the community is looking for us to do on their behalf. So, I have great empathy for what you're saying. I don't know that we can craft an ordinance, though, that's going to allow you to operate the way you would like, that would also allow us to govern the community in the way that we feel that our constituents are looking for.
Let me
Well,
ask the vice, excuse me, may I just ask the vice mayor to speak, because he's on Zoom, so
Sorry.
and then we can get back to, and you can continue. Vice
Yeah, the
Mayor.
only thing that, I really don't have much, again, to add, you guys are hitting on all the points that are in my mind. The brick and mortar is something that's important. I know that that space for that old bank is probably not being utilized. And it's probably impossible that we could, if we wanted to, close that space off and make another unit out of it, and create another brick and mortar spot. So that's my only recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, would you go ahead, sir? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
okay, I do appreciate that, looking to preserve the town, the village is important. I think what I would want to say is that it's definitely outside the box, but I think if you look at the whole model concept, I don't know if I would really apply, just like council said, the state is all for it. This code actually talks about storage trailers, and I don't know, because I'm not familiar enough, but I don't know if there's another space that could be replicated if this was allowed. I don't know if there's anything, I don't know if there's another old bank building that was there that has enough parking, has enough space, and has all that stuff. So I don't know if somebody could really replicate this request.
Hey, Keith, what is the difference in our code between utility trailer and storage trailer? Does it mean a pod?
Well, first of all, I don't agree with the interpretation of the code. The code is very clear. The intermittent or continual placement, parking, standing, or utilization of any trailer or travel trailer or temporary structure or vehicle used for storage purposes shall be prohibited in all zoning districts unless it's specifically allowed by code.
Gotcha.
And then we have a definition for trailer, which is basically any vehicle that's not self-propelled and has to be towed along by some other vehicle. But
Okay.
it is not just for storage, it's any trailer.
Perfect.
Doesn't matter what it's used for.
I think it does say used for storage.
One of the
elements.
One of the elements is used for storage. But sir, let me ask you this, are you willing to tow that every night?
Well, I prefer not to.
I understand.
Because the equipment that's inside of it is, it's big, and you make a wrong turn, or somebody stops, or something happens, you could lose a lot of equipment. It's piped in, you'd have to, there would be a lot of dismantling and demobilization
Right.
just to move it.
Right.
So-
Taking into consideration that you said that there's not another place in Tequesta that is similar to this, that you're proposing to put this in this particular location. I mean, what I think I would encourage you to do is to get with the city and find out if there's any way that you can get in compliance, given the unusual circumstances of this particular piece of property. And could you put it in there and be within the guidelines of our particular ordinance that addresses this type of thing? Try to get creative somewhat, still be within the guidelines and stuff of it. I mean, if you've got a building and stuff, I don't know, just kind of trying to figure out a way to make it work.
Well, that's.
Rather than trying to be negative about it and say, and trying to be open-minded about, what you're trying to propose.
Well, if you look, that's an interesting concept, Bruce, because if you look at certain places around the country, you will see people who have taken basically the equivalent of what you have
Yeah.
and made it a permanent structure.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, at that point, you're not moving it any longer. I don't know if that could be done at that location. I don't know if that's feasible or not.
Doesn't that fall into a whole other category then?
It would.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm
And it's
trying
not-
to.
it's not
I think that's
legislative.
what Bruce was suggesting.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
try to get creative about the way that you structure it and see if you can't make it fall within the guidelines of the way that the city requires you to do it.
I still just don't understand why you chose Tequesta. I haven't heard exactly what
The
what
area
was
is-
about Tequesta, and have you searched other areas?
Yes. Yeah, and this is perfect for us because of the proximity to our brick and mortar. We get done roasting, it's close. My son and my daughter-in-law are gonna be doing all this. We've been welcome to go to Lake Park, but it's, you know, when you think about it, it seems like you can't minimize, there's still time going there, coming back,
Now, would they allow you to come, Lake Park?
yes.
Okay,
They have a different one, right?
I know, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I'm kind of trying to feel out where his mindset is, because usually when people come to Tequesta, it's because there's a passionate urge in there, and there's a
Well,
specific
It's
reason.
the art, it's.
And I
so-
followed your story, and it's a little all over the place for me.
It's very artsy at the Gallery Square, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah,
it's,
it's,
It really is.
it's perfect. I mean, it's absolutely perfect. I mean, there's ways to, if you wanted to technically say it's not, mobile, you know, just removing the tires.
Well, you'd have to go beyond technical. You'd fall under other ordinances then that would be applicable, which Nelson could sit down and explain to you.
Yeah.
A permanent structure needs to comply with all the zoning regulations.
I mean, the other alternative to be in the Tequesta area, and I don't know how Martin County looks at this, but obviously you cross over County Line Road, and you've got all sorts of establishments on the east side of US 1 there. I don't know.
Stewart, they have a big art district up there that
Yeah.
wanted it too. It's for us, it's just close. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the village of Tequesta is our neighbor.
Well, I'm not in the coffee business, but I think if I was gonna do a coffee business, I would wanna be out on US 1 than I would be on Tequesta Drive.
You see, that's where, you know, I'm 63 years old, and I thought the same thing. My son and how he handles it, he wants to be, no signs, you know, I listen all about the signs, and I'm thinking to myself, he wouldn't even put a sign up. Everybody, they find him, the way that he orchestrates the social media, and they find him. He had an unbelievable following.
And we have coffee on Tequesta Drive.
well, let me ask our attorney something, because I want to clarify this, because it sounds lovely, absolutely lovely, and I understand what you're saying, but if we have one food truck / food trailer / anything that we agree to that doesn't have to move, let's say, for instance, because I think that's part of what we're talking about, are we able to do that? Do we
Well-
have to let everybody have the same?
Well, yes, I mean, you always have to treat similarly situated entities the same way, and if you're
Right.
getting into non-movable,
Right.
Nilsa can correct me if I'm wrong, but now you're getting into site plans and everything that goes with that.
Whole other element.
Correct.
Right, yeah. My fear is what you're talking about is stunning. I think it's beautiful. The problem is not everybody has your vision and your dream. And if we open the door and then someone comes around and wants to put something that you would not be liking yourself, let's just say, we then we cannot just selectively say, this is okay for you, but it's not okay for someone else. That's our dilemma.
I
That's a
understand,
dilemma.
but if the guidelines were followed, that, I'm using the Gallery Square because that's where I would love to be. It has ample parking, it technically, or forget technically, it has an overhang. I mean, what if I put screening on the front and the back? Would that be considered closed? You know, there's so many different interpretations of, I honestly called on a piece of property on Tequesta Drive because I would love to build, I get this pushback at first, but to put the trailer in a building with a big, huge glass door, it's inside and it meets all the requirements.
Right.
I mean, it would be great, but, they don't wanna sell that. I didn't talk to planning and zoning here, if that would even work, but I did call on the property and it was, I tried negotiating with them, but they didn't wanna do it. But I really think that if there was a path to say that this is a very unique space to do it, not the model, but the space, because it meets this, it has ample parking, it's, you know, it has all these ways to have a path to success, then I think that would alleviate the town from saying, well, this is why it's there. You can't put it across the street in, you know, the fire, you know, something, you know, one of the other art districts, because they just don't have the room.
Well, I think Councilmember Prince said it right. I mean, if you could sit down again, and maybe Mr. Peterson as well, since it is your property there, sit down with Nilsa and just figure out if there's anything that would make sense, even if it ends up being another building, essentially, is what we're talking about, and then it becomes a restaurant. So there's, you know, it's just, the problem is just, I can't feel comfortable just opening the door to having food trucks permanently, any kind of food truck, Airstream or Winnebago. We just can't open those doors, that's the problem. And
Well,
I think
I'm-
we're just trying to keep the same ambiance here in the village of DeQuesta that our residents expect of us.
Well, I'm grateful that you even took the time to speak with me. But to make sure that I'm crystal clear, if I moved it every day, then are we saying that's okay?
We haven't
That would
finished
still
this
be,
ordinance.
that would still not comply with the current code.
Still
Right.
wouldn't be compliant. You know, I like the, I mean, I think it's pretty cool what you're doing with it. I'm kind of like Lori. I mean, I like the old nostalgic looking stuff, and you know, in the right setting, I think it would be pretty cool to have, you know, as a place to go to, you know, and instead of that, where you can sit outside and amongst trees or what have you, and have coffee and get on the internet and stuff, you know, and everybody kind of sit out and hang out and drink, you know, good coffee. I'm sympathetic, and I wish that, you know, I could come up with a way to get it all figured out for you, but I think that what Mayor Brennan had said is you need to sit down and see if you can come up with some sort of way that you can get it in compliance somehow.
Okay.
I mean, off the cuff, I can't think of a way for you to do it.
Okay, and I thank you. I wanted to let you know this too. There's one other thing about the Airstream. When we had it at 312 Center Street, we, not just the coffee and not the ambiance around it, but, and again, pre-COVID, where people were able to go inside and sit down at this couch with a table. You have no idea the joy that we got, because people would talk to one another. People that didn't know each other, would they be sitting there having a coffee? How are you doing? And they'd be doing, all of a sudden, people were doing business together. They were interacting and commingling with one another, and people were coming to meet there to talk about other businesses, and people made a lot of friends there. So I would hope that, I don't know what the path would be that NEOSA or your council would be able to provide, or how long something like that would take. I mean, I'm in the building business, so it's sometimes it's a little difficult for me, because I look at a blueprint and I build it. You know, it's if it says pour blue concrete, I pour blue concrete. You know, but I don't know if there's a lot of hoops or a lot of things, and, you know, another artery that we would have to run down to find out. I would like to keep it simple. It's a 71 vintage Airstream trailer that's just gonna sell coffee out of it.
Well, I think as it stands now, trailers aren't permitted, so we would need to enact a new ordinance to even permit the trailer if it's going to be mobile. But I think in the short term, I would get together, as others have suggested, with Nilsa and Mr. Peterson, and see if there is a way to, like I said, there's other places around the country where you can see what used to be a mobile entity, an Airstream or some other entity, that is now permanently affixed and has become a permanent structure. And I don't know what would all be involved in achieving that, but that's certainly an option that you can pursue.
Okay. I guess that problem would be intensifying the use of the property that's there.
Yes.
You
Understood.
want to check with Mr. Stone one more time?
I appreciate you guys keep coming back to me. Again, you're hitting all the points. I'm not there, and this might come up a little bit harsh, but I'm not in favor at all allowing food trucks to be permanent.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on this topic? I'm not quite sure where we're going at this point, Keith. Are you
Well,
going to, and I'm not talking about the
Big,
applicant.
I mean, big picture is
The big
does the
picture.
council want to direct us to work on code to bring the village into,
Yes.
Definitely. And I
Food
like
truck regulations
the
within this-
various options. I
so
think
my
that's a-
suggestion would be, let us draft something, and I think we'd probably want to bring it back to another workshop for you to
Right.
pick apart, and then we can move it forward after that, if that's your
Second.
pleasure.
And Nelson, should you have ongoing discussions, if you could let us know if what progress is made, and I'd be curious too as to what steps would be, what would need to happen in order for, something like the Silver Stream to become a permanent structure? What would actually be required for that to actually qualify, so to speak?
Architecture, I'm also an architect, so you can be very creative in architecture. You can have a glass box, and inside that could be a feature, but then it becomes a permanent
Right.
structure, and it needs to comply with all our zoning
Correct,
regulations.
correct.
Well, I know a mobile home comes in being pulled by a tractor trailer on wheels. And then when you take it up, when you disconnect the truck to it, and you pull the tires off of it, and you anchor it to the ground, and you put a footer around the base of it, or then it becomes a home. And so there's ways to take and convert a pull-behind trailer into a permanent home for people. So, I mean, you might be able to get creative and get it figured out, I don't know.
We'd still have to meet all our other code and zoning requirements.
I just think because I think that's probably, I would appreciate it, Keith, as you were saying, that you would work on an ordinance that is in conformity, of course, with the state, because we have to, we understand that, but also has some of these items that could be attached to it so that we would be
We can
protected
have that
as
ready
well.
for you at your next workshop.
All right, that sounds good. Is there any other comments on this? All right, thank you very much for coming, and I take a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
It was cold in here.
It was cold?
It's cold in here.
You guys got I know there's lots of stuff on it, but you have a chance to
Yeah, I got so many
consider what
different
I
things
sent you
on it.
about looking at grants.
Okay.
I heard, I suppose.